5 days descending through the icy hell of the death zone. With a broken arm, no food, and no gear, Jean-Christophe Lafaille did the impossible after his partner, Pierre Béghin, fell to his death right before his eyes on the south face of Annapurna. But what drove this man, standing just 160 centimeters tall, to return again and again to a place where the air itself is lethal? And why, after surviving the nightmare on Annapurna, did he ultimately vanish forever during a solo winter attempt on Makalu? This is a story of total alpinism, of superhuman will, and of a single, fatal mistake. 160 centimeters of pure, living energy against a silent stone abyss. Jean-Christophe Lafaille is hanging by his fingertips, with hundreds of meters of empty space beneath his feet. No ropes, no margin for error. It all begins in 1965, in the small town of Gap. Jean-Christophe discovers the cliffs at age 7, and this world consumes him completely. The harsh limestone walls of Seus became his school. It's a place that doesn't forgive weakness, demanding perfect footwork and fingers of steel. Lafaille doesn't have an imposing physique. At just 160, his friends and rivals give him the nickname the Little Prince. But beneath that exterior lies an incredible focus and an ambition as vast as the Himalayan peaks. He devours the stories of legends like René de Maison and Walter Bonatti. Their philosophy of a pure style becomes his own personal code. Lafaille realizes that just climbing difficult routes isn't enough for him. He seeks absolute control over his mind and body. The culmination of this quest is his solo ascent of the route Le Privilège du Serpent, a grade 7 C+ route. For most climbers, that's the dream, even with a rope. Lafaille climbs it with no protection at all. Imagine that state of mind. Every single movement must be precise down to the millimeter. The slightest loss of balance, a damp handhold, a tremor in a muscle, and you're sent on a one-way flight into the void. But he moves with a fluid grace, as if dancing above the abyss. This moment defines his very essence. He proves to himself that fear can be mastered. It's here that the concept he would call total alpinism is born. The idea is as audacious as it is simple. Take the absolute technical difficulty of sport climbing and transplant it into the thin air of the high mountains. He isn't interested in just walking to a summit. He wants to climb vertical faces where others can barely breathe. In the early 1990s, Jean-Christophe earns his mountain guide diploma. He's ready for the big leagues, and he immediately sets strict rules for himself. No oxygen tanks and no help from high-altitude porters. Just him, the mountain, and an honest reckoning with himself. For Lafaille, alpinism isn't about conquering peaks at any cost. It's a way of discovering his own limits, and very soon, he will go to a place where those limits are erased completely. Before him is a wall that looms like a giant granite cornice, blocking out half the sky. This is the Grand Pilier d'Angle, the wildest and most remote bastion of Mont Blanc. It's here, in 1990, that Jean-Christophe Lafaille comes to put his theory into practice. He chooses a route with a telling name, Divine Providence. In the world of climbing, there are difficulty ratings understood only by the initiated, and this route is stamped with the notorious grade of ED4. It's an otherworldly level of difficulty. Most elite climbers dream of climbing it with a partner, belaying and supporting each other. Lafaille climbs it solo. He is alone on a kilometer-high vertical face, where the rock is coated in verglas and the air is growing thin. Here, his concept of total alpinism receives its baptism by fire. He moves quickly, confidently, transplanting the technical difficulty of sport climbing to an altitude of 4,000 meters. The success on Divine Providence has the effect of a bombshell. Now everyone can see. The little prince has grown up and is playing in a league of his own. But that's not enough for him. He needs conditions that break even the strongest of spirits. He turns his gaze to the west face of the Petit Dru. This mountain is an icon of the Alps, a perfect granite spire. Lafaille decides to make the challenge as extreme as possible and heads there in winter. Winter alpinism is a completely different sport. The rock is frozen solid, the daylight is brutally short, and the cold seeps into your bones, turning every movement into a battle against your own body. On the face of the Dru, he forges an entirely new line. Jean-Christophe works like a jeweler and a laborer at the same time. He combines free climbing, clinging to microscopic holds with frozen fingers, with aid climbing techniques, where he has to trust his weight to precarious, unreliable placements. And so, Voie Lafaille, a route bearing his own name, is born. He creates a problem that the global climbing community can't solve for decades. Just think about it. For more than 20 years, no one is able to repeat his route as a free climb. That's how high this relentless Frenchman set the bar. These ascents become his calling card. Mont Blanc and the Petit Dreux are his proving grounds, where he hones his skills in survival and technical mastery. He proves he can operate at the very edge of human capability in the harshest conditions imaginable. Now, the Alps are starting to feel too small. His gaze turns eastward to the giant faces of the Himalayas, where altitude is measured not in thousands of meters, but in kilometers, and where the stakes of the game are raised exponentially. A single dry, metallic click is all that separates triumph from total catastrophe. The year is 1992. Jean-Christophe Lafaille accepts a challenge that's impossible to refuse. Pierre Béghin, an icon of French alpinism and a mentor to Lafaille, invites him to climb the south face of Annapurna. This isn't just a mountain. It's a vertical labyrinth of ice and rock, standing 8,091 meters tall. They choose the purest and most dangerous approach, alpine style. Imagine you're going to the moon, but you can only take what fits in your backpack. No Sherpas to fix ropes, no established camps, and of course, no oxygen. They are a team of two, relying only on their own strength and a bit of luck. At first, the mountain lets them in. The pair works in perfect sync, like a single machine, gaining altitude quickly. They pass the 7,000-meter mark. The summit seems close, but Annapurna is famous for its treachery. The weather turns in an instant. The sky comes crashing down with leaden weight, and a storm wind rises, powerful enough to literally rip people from the slope. On October 11th, it becomes clear. There is no way up. The only option is to flee downwards to survive. An escape from hell begins. The slope is too steep to downclimb, so they have to rappel, descending by rope. Pierre Béghin sets up an anchor. He places a camming device, a friend, into a crack in the rock, a device designed to expand under load and hold a person's weight. Pierre clips in the rope, weights the system, and begins his descent. Lafaille stands beside him on a tiny ledge, watching his partner. Suddenly, the unthinkable happens. The rock holding the device crumbles, or the mechanism shifts. We'll never know for sure. The anchor fails. Pierre Béghin plummets into the abyss. He vanishes into the mist in a fraction of a second, without a sound. And with him, everything disappears into the void. Their main ropes, all their bivouac gear, their food, and their hope. Lafaille is left standing on the face, frozen in horror. The silence after the fall is more deafening than the wind. He is alone at 7,000 meters. A storm is raging around him. He looks down at his harness and understands the full terror of his situation. He has no way of setting up a proper rappel. All he has left is a 20-meter length of thin cord, 20 meters of rope, the thickness of a pinky finger, against kilometers of vertical wall below. In that moment, he becomes the loneliest man on the planet. There is no choice. Either you go down, or you stay here forever as an icebound statue. Jean-Christophe looks into the abyss below his feet and makes a decision that seems like madness. He begins to downclimb. This is every climber's worst nightmare, climbing down a face of extreme difficulty, unable to see where you're putting your feet, knowing your protection is purely symbolic. He has a scrap of cord, 20 meters. His survival becomes an agonizing cycle. He secures the rope, descends 20 meters, finds a tiny ledge, pulls the cord down, and repeats, hundreds of times, hour after hour, day after day. But Annapurna doesn't release its prisoners so easily. A rock falls from above, a dull thud. Lafaille feels a sharp, searing pain in his right arm. It goes limp. The situation has now gone from critical to impossible. Try tying your shoelaces with just your left hand. Now imagine you have to tie complex knots, build anchors, and hold your own body weight on vertical ice when the temperature is far below -20. Jean-Christophe starts using his teeth. He clenches the rope in his jaw, pulls with his good hand, and uses his elbows and knees to help. The harsh nylon shreds his mouth, his lips crack from the frost, but he keeps tying knots. This is no longer a sport, this is animal instinct. The third day passes, the fourth, the fifth. His body is consuming itself. The line between reality and delusion blurs. Lafaille starts seeing things that aren't there. He imagines tents on the snowy slope. He hears the voices of friends calling to him. The rocks come alive and reach out for him. The hallucinations are so vivid, he has to physically shake his head to tell a life-saving ledge from a mirage. The most terrible temptation is to simply sit down and close his eyes. The snow looks so soft and warm. At that very same time, thousands of kilometers away in France, the phone rings in Lafaille's home. A voice on the other end delivers the terrible news to his wife. Jean-Christophe is missing. There's no hope. The family begins to mourn him, accepting the inevitable. No one believes a person can survive in the death zone for 5 days without food or gear. But he is still moving, like a clockwork doll that's almost wound down. One step, then another. Down below, at the base camp of a Slovenian expedition, climbers spot a strange figure stumbling across the glacier. The man looks like a ghost. He is emaciated, his gaze is empty, and one arm is held unnaturally against his body. The Slovenians rush to meet him. They catch him, unable to believe their eyes. Jean-Christophe Lafaille is back from the dead. The experience burns away everything non-essential, leaving only a crystal-clear understanding of the value of life. Physical wounds heal, bones knit back together. But how do you mend a mind that stared death in the face for 5 days? After returning from Annapurna, Jean-Christophe endures a long and agonizing recovery. Doctors piece his body back together, but the biggest question remains. Will he ever be able to cross that invisible line above 8,000 meters again? Or will fear paralyze him at the very sight of ice? He goes looking for the answer in 1993 on Cho Oyu. It's the 6th highest peak in the world. For Lafaille, this isn't a pursuit of glory. It's therapy, a test drive for his own body. And here, something unique in his career happens. He puts on an oxygen mask. Remember this moment. It's the only time in his entire life he will ever do this. Jean-Christophe isn't using the bottled oxygen to make the ascent easier, but as a form of medical insurance. His circulation, after the frostbite and injuries, is still unstable, and the risk of losing his fingers and toes again is just too high. The oxygen here is a crutch, a tool he needs to learn how to walk again. Standing on the summit of Cho Oyu, he realizes something crucial. The death zone no longer holds that paralyzing terror for him. He's alive, he's functional. This is the beginning of his rebirth. In 1994, Lafaille takes off the training wheels and heads for Shishapangma. No more compromises. He returns to the pure style he championed before the tragedy. Jean-Christophe chooses the north face and finds a line where no human has ever set foot. He climbs a new variation of the route, solo. Just imagine the contrast. A year ago, he was practically an invalid, and now he's solving a complex geometric puzzle on an 8,000er, all by himself. He moves up the face with the elegance of a dancer, each swing of his ice axe a resounding affirmation of life. For this ascent, the French Federation of Mountaineering awards him a prestigious honor, recognizing his phenomenal comeback. It's on the slopes of Shishapangma that his new philosophy of survival fully crystallizes. Lafaille develops a formula. Safety equals speed. Large expeditions with tons of gear and dozens of people are just lumbering targets for avalanches and bad weather. He decides to do things differently. A small group, or completely solo. Maximum technical difficulty to shorten the route. And above all, speed. The less time you spend on the mountain, the less chance the mountain has to kill you. He transforms into a high-altitude predator, built for speed and ready for new records. 2 8,000ers, 1 push, and a complete disregard for the laws of physiology. 1996 becomes the arena where Lafaille decides to put his new strategy to the ultimate test, and for this, he chooses the Karakoram range. His targets, Gasherbrum 1 and Gasherbrum 2. Typically, expeditions spend weeks on each of these mountains, setting up camps, acclimatizing, making a summit push, then taking a long rest. Jean-Christophe looks at the map and doesn't see two separate peaks, but a single, continuous line. He conceives of a traverse. His plan has no room for returning to base camp to rest. He's going to link the two summits with a single thread, without ever descending to where he can breathe properly. It's a challenge that demands not just strength, but phenomenal endurance. First, he attacks Gasherbrums 1 at 8,080 meters, and even here, he refuses to follow the beaten path. Lafaille chooses the unclimbed northeast face. He goes solo, forging a new route where others only saw blank spots on the map. He works fast, using his rock climbing experience, and soon stands on the first summit. At this point, any normal person would turn back down, toward warmth, hot food, and thick air. At this altitude, the body literally consumes itself. Every minute drains energy that can't be replaced. But Lafaille turns toward the second mountain. He stays high, holding on to the altitude he's gained, and begins the traverse to Gasherbrums 2. Picture this marathon. You're running on a knife's edge at the cruising altitude of a jetliner, your lungs are on fire, and your brain is screaming at you to stop. But Jean-Christophe keeps moving. He storms the second summit, 8,035 meters. This entire incredible journey, from the base of the first mountain, up a new route, across the traverse, and to the summit of the second, takes him just 4 days. 96 non-stop hours at the very edge of human possibility. The mountaineering world is in shock. Lafaille demonstrates a recovery rate that seems biologically impossible. He descends, having not just completed his objective, but having shattered old ideas about tactics. He is now officially cemented among the elite as a speed climber. He has proven that total alpinism works even here, in the kingdom of eternal cold, turning multi-week sieges into swift, dagger-like strikes. K2 has nightmarish statistics. For every 4 people who reach the summit, 1 dies trying. In 2001, Jean-Christophe Lafaille chooses this very mountain, which climbers call the Savage Mountain, for the ultimate test of his life. If the Gasherbrums were a race, K2 is a war, and he doesn't go to this war alone. His partner is Hans Kammerlander, a Tyrolean with nerves of steel. Imagine this team, 2 of the best high-altitude climbers of their generation joining forces. They immediately reject the classic Abruzzi spur, which is usually draped with kilometers of fixed ropes and clogged with commercial groups. They want a real challenge. They choose the Cezanne route, a line that demands masterful technique, not just brute endurance. But the mountain strikes first, before they even begin their final push. An avalanche sweeps down from the upper slopes and obliterates their intermediate camp. When the pair look up, they realize they're left with nothing. Their gear stash is destroyed, tents, fuel, food, all of it buried under tons of snow. The situation is a dead end. Without fuel, you can't melt snow, which means no water. At 8,000 meters, dehydration kills faster than the cold. Your blood thickens into a syrup, and your heart simply stops. At this moment, logic dictates only one thing: go down. But Lafaille and Kammerlander make a decision that borders on madness. They continue the ascent. They bet everything on speed, deciding to blast through the death zone faster than thirst can bring them down. It's an all-or-nothing gamble, with their lives on the line. On July 22nd, they enter the final stretch. The air here is so thin that every step requires several breaths. But they climb without oxygen masks. Their lungs work at their absolute limit, squeezing molecules of life from the stratosphere. And then, there it is. The summit. 8,611 meters. Jean-Christophe stands on the second highest point on the planet, looking down on the world. But the euphoria is short-lived. The most terrifying part is still ahead. The descent. The statistics are merciless. Most tragedies on K2 happen on the way down, when concentration wanes and strength is gone. To descend the complex terrain of the Cezanne route in a state of extreme exhaustion is like walking a tightrope over an abyss after running a marathon. Lafaille summons every last ounce of his will. Every movement is precise, every step controlled. He makes it down, proving his philosophy right. Success on K2 is the ultimate triumph of his approach. The concept of total alpinism works even here, on the most brutal mountain in the world. Technical mastery and speed allow him to survive where huge expeditions fail. There are some ghosts you can't run from. You can only return to face them. After his triumph on K2, Jean-Christophe understands. Technically, he's ready for anything, but his soul is still chained to the south face of Annapurna. Exactly 10 years have passed since the day Pierre Béghin vanished into the abyss, and Lafaille began his own hellish descent with one arm. The year is 2002. He returns. This isn't a sporting expedition. It's an exorcism. The goal is to fight fire with fire. Lafaille has to climb the peak that nearly killed him to finally stop waking up from nightmares of that stormy October. But Jean-Christophe wouldn't be himself if he chose the easy way. He sets his sights on the East Ridge. Imagine a gigantic knife blade, 7.5 kilometers long. The entire route is above 7,000 meters. This is a zone where life fades with every passing hour. Most climbers try to get through sections like this as quickly as possible, but Lafaille plans to live on this ridge for days. It's a monstrous traverse, demanding not just skill, but the constitution of a horse. This time, he's not alone. His partner is the Basque climber Alberto Inurrategui, a living legend who is just one step away from completing all 14 8,000ers. They form a perfect team, French audacity and Basque tenacity. The pair sets out onto the ridge. To the left is Tibet, to the right, Nepal, and below their feet, kilometers of empty space. The wind here meets no obstacles, hitting with such force that they have to literally dig their crampons into the ice to avoid being blown away like a feather. Down in base camp and back in France, Katia Lafaille is watching. She turns the climb into a media event. Using a satellite phone and the internet, she broadcasts her husband's every step to the world. Thousands of people follow a dot on a map, understanding that, for Jean-Christophe, this is a matter of life and death, a matter of his own sanity. The tension is immense because everyone remembers. Annapurna is the deadliest of all the 8,000ers. They move along the ridge like tightrope walkers. Lafaille passes places that remind him of the tragedy, but now he is in control. Fear transforms into absolute focus. May 16th. They are on the summit. Jean-Christophe stands on the highest point, and the wind dries the tears on his face. He looks down at the very slope where, 10 years earlier, he lost his friend and found himself anew. The circle is now complete. He lets go of the past. The mountain no longer has power over him. In that moment, he feels an incredible lightness. The weight of a decade of grief vanishes, dissolving into the thin air. Now, he is truly free. Freedom is more intoxicating than oxygen, and after freeing himself from the ghosts of Annapurna, Jean-Christophe feels not exhaustion, but a ravenous appetite. The year 2003 begins. Lafaille unveils a project that sounds like it's defying common sense. 3 8,000-meter peaks in a single season. And not just to climb them. The goal is to do it fast, with technical grace and with a certain flair. This isn't mountaineering in the classic sense anymore. It's a vertical race, and the stadium is all of Asia. The first stage, Dhaulagiri, the White Mountain in Nepal, the 7th highest peak in the world, 8,167 meters. Lafaille approaches it with the precision of a surgeon. He makes a solo ascent. No fuss, no drama. He reaches the summit, ticks the box, and immediately descends. For him, this is just a warm-up, a systems check before the main course. He immediately moves on to Pakistan, to the foot of Nanga Parbat. Nanga Parbat, the killer mountain. 9th in height, but among the first in difficulty. Here, Jean-Christophe changes his tactics. This time, solitude gives way to a partnership between two titans. He's joined by Simone Moro, a tireless Italian whose energy perfectly resonates with the Frenchman's ambition. They're looking at the Diamir face. It's a gigantic shield of rock stretching over 3 kilometers into the sky. The classic Kinshofar route, it seems a little too dull for them. They're looking for their own line. The pair works as a single organism. They find a way through where others see only a dead end. This is creativity on the edge of risk. Steep ice, mixed sections where you have to climb rock wearing crampons, and all of this in the death zone. They forge a completely new route. This is the pinnacle of the sport, to leave your signature on a mountain of this scale. They name the line Tom and Katia. Jean-Christophe dedicates this success to the people closest to him, his wife and son, connecting the icy abyss with the warmth of home. On June 23rd, they stand on the summit of Nanga Parbat, 8,125 meters. Lafaille feels like a god. He hasn't just survived, he's brimming with strength. His body is working like a nuclear reactor, converting thin air into pure energy. He is at his absolute peak. Down below, however, in cozy chalets and magazine offices, the voices of critics begin to emerge. The traditionalists are frowning. They accuse Lafaille of peak bagging. They say he's turning a sacred ascent into a common sport, a chase for numbers. That speed is killing the soul of mountaineering. Jean-Christophe hears these criticisms, but they bounce off him like hail off a helmet. He couldn't care less about the labels. He knows something they don't. He isn't collecting peaks. He's exploring the limits of what's possible, and he's not done yet. The third objective looms ahead, and the race against time is only just getting started. 3 peaks in 2 months sounds like a triumphant record, but the body keeps its own score, and now it's time to pay the bill. Jean-Christophe Lafaille stands at the foot of Broad Peak. This is the final leg of his insane marathon, an altitude of 8,051 meters. He can already feel the built-up fatigue, a heavy lead settling into his muscles, but the thrill of the chase pushes him upward. This time, he's with the elite. Alongside him are Ed Viesturs, a calm and calculated American, and his old friend Simone Moreau. This is a dream team. They work with precision, breaking trail towards the summit. On July 15th, they stand on the highest point. The trilogy is complete. Lafaille has done the impossible. 3 8,000ers in one season. He's on top of the world, and the euphoria is overriding the alarm signals his body is sending. But the descent turns into a nightmare. A trap lies hidden on the glacier, a snow bridge that looks solid but collapses under a person's weight. Jean-Christophe plunges into a crevasse. The jolt of the rope saves him from falling to the bottom, and he scrambles out, but the shock is the final straw. His body, exhausted by the months-long race, breaks down. The mechanism of destruction is triggered instantly. His breathing becomes ragged, gurgling. This isn't just shortness of breath. It's pulmonary edema, HAPE. Fluid from his blood vessels begins to leak into his lungs. A person begins to slowly drown inside their own body while on dry land. His lungs fill with foam, and oxygen stops reaching his blood. Lafaille, who just an hour ago was a high-speed athlete, becomes a helpless doll. His legs refuse to obey. His consciousness clouds over. He sits down in the snow and can't get back up. Now, the rescuers step in. Ed Viesturs and Denis Urubko, one of the strongest climbers from the post-Soviet school who has joined them, understand. It's a matter of minutes. If they leave Lafaille here, he'll be dead by morning. A desperate evacuation begins. Urubko and Viesturs literally drag Jean-Christophe down the mountain. It's a titanic effort, bringing an incapacitated man down a steep ice face when they themselves have almost no strength left. Denis Urubko works like a machine, taking on most of the injured man's weight. They fight for every meter of lost altitude because only the thicker air below can stop the drowning process in his lungs. They make it. Jean-Christophe is brought to base camp, where doctors and rest do their work. He survives. But the incident leaves a deep scar on his confidence. The mountain made it clear, even total alpinism has its limits. Speed and technique cannot override physiology. The race for records nearly cost him his life, showing that the human body's margin of safety is finite, and Lafaille had pushed right to the very edge. The calendar on the wall in a warm office might say, autumn, but the thermometer at 8,000 meters is screaming something else entirely. Jean-Christophe Lafaille stands on the summit of Shishapangma on December 11th, 2004. He is surrounded by an icy hell. The temperature is -30, and the wind is strong enough to freeze your thoughts. He has just completed a solo ascent via a brand new route. For him, it's a triumph. He is certain he has just written his name in history by making the first winter ascent of this 8,000er. Jean-Christophe descends a victor. He's relying on meteorological data. In the Himalayas, winter effectively begins on December 1st, when the jet stream drops, turning the peaks into zones of extreme turbulence. He went through that cold, he survived solo, he did it fair and square. But down below, he's met not with an ovation, but with the cold shower of bureaucracy. The mountaineering community pulls out astronomical charts and points to the date. The winter solstice doesn't happen until December 21st. 10 days were left until the official start of winter. The verdict from the mountaineering officials is harsh and formal. Lafaille's ascent is considered an autumn climb. His claim to a historic record is rejected. The situation becomes even more painful when, a month later, Simone Moro, the very man who helped save Lafaille on Broad Peak, arrives at the mountain. The Italian plays by the calendar's rules. In January, during the real astronomical winter, Moro reaches the summit. History officially recognizes Moro's expedition as the first winter pioneers, not the Frenchman's solo breakthrough. Lafaille is furious. He takes it as a personal insult, a slap in the face to his philosophy. To him, it's absurd. The mountain doesn't know the planet's schedule. The cold on December 11th is no different from the cold on the 21st. Jean-Christophe publicly attacks the system. He says that the armchair climbers have forgotten what real risk is. He feels robbed. His technical genius and incredible courage are shattered against a paragraph in the rulebook. This conflict becomes a turning point. The resentment burns inside him, hotter than the freezing air. Lafaille decides that next time, he will leave the skeptics no room for doubt. He needs a comeback. He needs a goal that will be absolute. The argument over dates pushes him to the extreme. He decides to go where winter will be undeniable, to the very heart of January, to prove to the world and to himself that he is the king of the high places, and no calendar can take away his greatness. There is no judge more strict and merciless than the summit of Makalu at the end of January. Jean-Christophe Lafaille chooses this very mountain to put an end to the debate with calendars and officials. His goal is simple and terrifying: to make the first ever true winter solo ascent of the world's fifth highest peak, 8,485 meters. No autumn dates, no compromises. He arrives in the Himalayas when every living thing has fled. The base camp greets him with a ringing emptiness. Usually dozens of expeditions are bustling here, but now Lafaille is the only person in this gigantic stone bowl. The conditions are beyond any concept of comfort. The temperature drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius even during the day. But the main enemy is the wind. In winter, the jet stream descends, and a hurricane-force wind literally polishes the mountain's slopes. The snow is blown clean away, exposing hard, steel-like bottle ice. To move upward, you can't just walk. You have to constantly cut steps and dig in with the front points of your crampons into the glassy surface. The only thread connecting him to humanity is a satellite phone. Jean-Christophe is in total isolation. If something happens, help won't arrive for at least a week, if at all. Every evening he checks in, his voice cutting through thousands of kilometers of static to report. He's alive. He's still climbing. On January 26th, Lafaille makes his decisive push. He climbs to an altitude of 7,600 meters. Here, on a tiny patch of ground, blasted by all the winds of the universe, he sets up his assault tent. It's a tiny nylon dome separating the warmth of a living body from the cosmic cold. The night is a struggle for warmth, a battle to melt ice for a drink. The morning of January 27th arrives. The satellite phone comes to life again. Jean-Christophe makes contact. His voice is filled with extreme focus and determination. He reports that he feels great, the weather is holding, and he's ready for the final push. Less than a vertical kilometer remains to the summit. He leaves all non-essential gear in the tent, takes only what he needs, and steps out to meet his greatest ambition. This morning is supposed to be his moment of ultimate triumph. A click of the switch, a brief burst of static, and the line goes completely, utterly silent. That morning call on January 27th would be the last proof of Jean-Christophe Lafaille's life. He walks into the white silence, and the mountain instantly snaps the trap shut behind him. Immediately after he sets out, the weather, which was already on the edge, spirals out of control. At 8,000 meters, the wind becomes a roaring torrent, with speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. This isn't just air. It's a physical wall, strong enough to knock a man off his feet and hurl him into the abyss like a dry leaf. The temperature plummets to levels incompatible with life. Makalu transforms into a meat grinder of ice. Down below, back in civilization, Katia Lafaille watches the clock. The hands crawl forward, relentless. An hour passes, then 2, then a day. The scheduled call-in time comes and goes, but the phone stays silent. Anxiety turns to panic, and panic to the cold, dawning horror of what's happened. She sounds the alarm, calling everyone she can. A rescue operation is scrambled, but this is where the cruel irony of high-altitude mountaineering kicks in. The very storm that has likely claimed Jean-Christophe's life is the same one keeping anyone from getting near the mountain to help. Helicopters are grounded, pinned down by a leaden sky. Rescue teams can only stare helplessly at the cloud-shrouded slopes. Days of agonizing waiting crawl by, with hope melting away faster than snow in the sun. It's not until February 4th that a window of clear weather opens up. A powerful Llama helicopter takes to the sky. On board are Katia herself and the veteran Finnish mountaineer Veikka Gustafsson. Just imagine that flight, a wife flying to find her husband, scanning the lifeless rock faces, knowing the chances of finding him alive are next to none. The chopper pushes to its absolute limit, the rotors churning through the thin air, the engine screaming in protest. The pilots reach an altitude of 7,600 meters. Their eyes scan the slope, and then they see it. A tiny speck on the vast gray face of the mountain. A tent, but it's not right. It's shredded, ripped apart by the wind, half buried in snow. The sight is somehow worse than seeing nothing at all. The helicopter circles. Katia and Veikka strain their eyes, searching for any sign of movement. The bright color of a snowsuit, the wave of a hand. But around the tent, there's nothing but an icy wasteland. The wind that has howled here for a week has wiped the slate clean. No tracks, no line of footprints heading for the summit, no sign of a descent. The mountain is pristine. Jean-Christophe is gone. A search above and below the campsite yields nothing. The helicopter is forced to turn back before its fuel runs out. And in that moment, the missing status becomes a death sentence. One of the greatest mountaineers of our time had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a shredded tent and a universe of unanswered questions. Makalu doesn't give up its dead, turning the end of this story into an ellipsis that can never be erased. The body of Jean-Christophe Lafaille is never found. The mountain keeps him for itself, burying the evidence under meters of permanent snow. All we're left with is an empty stage after the final curtain has fallen. The absence of a body gives rise to dozens of theories, but they all boil down to the brutal mathematics of the high peaks. Think about the physics of that moment. The wind on the ridge can reach speeds that could lift a heavy object right off the ground, and Lafaille weighed only about 60 kilograms. On a 45-degree slope of sheer ice, a single gust would be enough to simply blow a man away, sending him into Tibet, into a 2-kilometer deep abyss. Veikka Gustafsson, the veteran Finn who searched for him from the air, suggests another theory, one that's more terrifying in its sheer mundanity. Fatigue, hypoxia. It's an insidious killer. It shuts down the brain so quietly, it's like someone simply turning off a light. You just make one wrong step, a crampon snags on your pant leg. You lose your balance for a fraction of a second. At 8,400 meters, with no ropes, that's a death sentence, carried out in an instant. Most likely Jean-Christophe fell into a massive crevasse, or was swept down the face of the mountain without even realizing what was happening. But when the body vanishes, the name becomes a monument. Lafaille isn't remembered as a victim of his own ambition, but as a titan who changed the entire game. He was one of the most versatile climbers of his generation. His concept of total alpinism lives on in every speed ascent we see today. When modern athletes race up summits solo, with minimal gear, bypassing the classic siege-style tactics, they are following the path forged by the Little Prince. He proved that technical climbing at a 7C grade was possible even in the death zone, where your brain cells are literally dying. His voice continues to echo from the pages of his book, Prisoner of Annapurna. This book became a Bible for survival. When you read it, you're not just getting a trip report. You're hearing the confession of a man who clawed his way back to life with nothing but sheer grit. It's a story that teaches you to fight on, even when all hope is, and should be, gone. The tragedy on Makalu shines a spotlight on the sharpest dilemma in high-stakes mountaineering. Where is that invisible line between calculated risk and suicide? Lafaille spent his entire life dancing on that line, pushing it further and further out. He believed that skill could cheat the odds. But the mountains have a way of reminding us that the elements always have the final say. Jean-Christophe Lafaille passed into legend, leaving behind an example of incredible willpower and a timeless reminder of the terrible price you pay for trying to touch the sky.